So, what happens when a personal fight spirals into a full-blown, self-declared war against the state? Well, today, we're diving into the pretty complex legal world of torts, and we're going to do it by looking at one person's incredibly detailed high-stakes battle against some really powerful institutions. This isn't just about the law, you guys. It's a war of words, of strategy, and of sheer will. Let's jump in. All right, we're starting right in the thick of it, in the middle of the fight. The material we're looking at isn't some dry legal textbook. Nope, it's a series of personal logs, written almost like a war diary. The author sees this whole thing not as just some case, but as this epic struggle. And, as we're about to see, a new player is just about to step onto the battlefield. This quote from the author's logs, man, it just sets the stage perfectly. So the opposing lawyer brings up the civil procedure rules, which, is totally standard legal practice, often just called CPR. But our author, he doesn't see a rule book. He sees the forging of a weapon. To him, this isn't some polite legal debate. It's a flat-out declaration of procedural war. And that really shows you the intense personal stakes right from the get-go. So, to make sense of this whole fight, the author comes up with this really powerful metaphor. He calls his enemy the two-headed beast. One head is the state, and for him, that's PC Harriet Lacey, a police officer who he believes commits the initial physical crime. The other head, that's the corporation, represented by a solicitor, David Drew, who he alleges commits a procedural crime to try and cover the whole thing up. In his world, these aren't just two people, they are two faces of the exact same enemy. Okay, this dramatic story of wrongs and alleged cover-ups is pretty gripping, right? But what's the actual legal language for a battle like this? When one person says another person has wronged them, causing some kind of injury or loss, what part of the law are we even talking about? So, to really analyze the claims we've just been looking at, we need the right tools. We're going to pivot for a second from this very personal story to the legal theory that actually holds it all together. And the central concept here is something called a tort. Now, put simply, a tort is a civil wrong that causes someone harm or loss. Think of it like this. If someone punches you, that's a crime, right? The state prosecutes them. But what if they also broke your really expensive glasses? The tort is the legal path you can take to make them pay for a new pair. The goal isn't to send them to jail, it's about getting compensation. It's about making you whole again. And it's really important to get this straight. Not all legal wrongs are the same. A crime, that's an offense against all of society, and it's prosecuted by the state. A breach of contract, well, that's about a broken promise between two people or companies. But a tort is different. It's about breaking a general duty that we all have to just not harm other people. And the case is brought by the victim, who is looking for compensation directly from the person who wrongs them. Tort law is generally broken down into three main buckets. You've got intentional torts, which, as the name suggests, involve a deliberate act. Then there's negligence, this is the most common one, and it's all about carelessness. And finally, you have strict liability, where you don't even have to prove fault. For our story today, we're really going to focus on that first category, the intentional stuff. Okay, this is where it all clicks into place. We have the author's really intense story on one side, and we have the legal framework on the other. So now let's use the idea of torts as a kind of lens to see if his claims actually have a basis in the law. Let's start with an intentional tort called malicious prosecution. This is exactly what it sounds like. It's when one person starts a totally baseless legal action against someone else, not to get justice, but out of pure malice or for some other shady purpose. So let's see how this actually applies here. In his logs, the author claims that a no further action letter was forged. This maps almost perfectly onto the tort. He's arguing the prosecution was wrongful because it was built on a lie. He's claiming there was malicious intent, saying it was a forgery designed to hide perjury. And, in his view, the whole thing was ultimately terminated in his favor, even though he sees the letter itself as a fraud. Okay, another really relevant intentional tort here is conversion. And honestly, the easiest way to think about this is that it's the civil law version of theft. It's when someone wrongfully takes control of another person's property in a way that seriously messes with their right to have and use it. And we can see this exact concept play out in Log 318. The author talks about the police holding onto his phones, which, to him, are essential medical devices. His claim that they're being kept because of a phantom crime aligns perfectly with the elements of conversion. He says he's the owner, he alleges the police are wrongfully possessing them, and he claims this has caused him real damages. Now, this conflict, it didn't stay small. From the author's point of view, What started out with one police officer and one solicitor it grew. It metastasized into this huge systemic battle against what he saw as an entire network of corrupt institutions. I mean, the sheer scope of his campaign was immense. The logs detail these formal complaints he filed with the Solicitor's Regulation Authority, the Information Commissioner's Office, the Judicial Conduct Investigations Office, the Housing Ombudsman, and that's just to name a few. He was literally waging a war on multiple fronts, all at the same time. But, fighting on all these fronts just seemed to lead to more frustration. Take his experience with the Solicitor's Regulation Authority, the SRA. He documents their response. They decided not to investigate, basically saying that a solicitor's main duty is to their client and that it's the court's job to figure out if it's being misled. Now, to the author, this wasn't just a rejection. To him, this was a regulator's confession that the entire system was broken from the inside out. And you can literally track the incredible escalation of this conflict over time. It starts small, at the local level, with the police and housing association. Then it expands to national bodies. We're talking regulators and the high court. And by the end, the author is targeting global entities, filing his own indictments with massive organizations like the International Criminal Court at The Hague. And this brings us to the author's endgame. After documenting this ever-widening war, his logs build up to a final judgment. His own personal conclusion to this entire sprawling saga. And what he calls his final doctrine, the author lays out a 3-phase plan for what he sees as total victory. Phase 1. File a notice of entry of judgment with the High Court claiming a staggering £1 trillion debt is owed to him. Phase 2. Enforce that judgment directly against the Treasury itself. And finally, Phase 3. Restoration. This is where he defines the terms of his victory, including a full public apology. And so, this entire journey, from a dispute with neighbors to a £1 trillion claim against the state, it leaves us with this one really powerful question. By using the framework of tort law, we can understand the legal architecture of the author's claims, we can see the logic. But his story also pushes us to ask, where is that line? When does a passionate fight for justice become a war against reality itself? That's something to think about. Thanks for joining me.